listening to the TrekCore transmissions.
Shore Leave, episode 36, Star Trek events in New York City.
Just what the doctor ordered. Right, doctor? I couldn't have prescribed better.
Hello and welcome once again to Shore Leave, your Star Trek convention community podcast. This is our 36th episode, and tonight we are talking about all things Star Trek in New York City this fall. Here alongside me is the always awesome Heather Barker. How are you tonight, Heather?
I'm doing pretty well. I love New York, although I've only been there once. Oh, wait. Well, I lived in New York for 2 years. I forgot that. Oh. So maybe I've been to New York City twice.
Well, I love New York too. I live an hour and a half away from it, and I am confessing right now I'm the biggest slacker in the Trek community. I didn't go to any of these New York events this fall. I had conflicts for every single one of them, but thankfully we have two people here tonight who were at some of these events and are going to talk about them with us. First up is our returning guest, Mr. Elijah from the Priority One podcast. How are you tonight, Elijah?
I'm doing well. I'm exhausted. I'm doing a show here locally, which, Jeff, I hope you'll come see. But otherwise, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
I have to do that too. See, another thing that I've been slacking on. I must get over there to see that show. So very near future. And our second guest is new to the show. It's Mr. Ken Reilly from TrekCore. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, Jeff. I'm doing very well tonight. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Welcome to the show. Glad you could join us.
Glad to be here.
All right. So maybe we should kick things off with New York Comic Con. That was a little while ago now. It was held October 5th through the 8th, 2017, up in the Jacob Javits Center. I think both of you guys were in attendance for that. Elijah, you were definitely there.
Yes, I was.
Yep, I was there as well. I was only on the show floor on Sunday, but I was there for the Saturday panels for the Discovery event in the Madison Square Garden Theater.
Awesome. Elijah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah. Were you both there with press passes or regular passes this time?
I was there with a press pass for TrekCore.
Okay.
I was there with a regular pass.
Oh, cool. All right. Just always curious since we talked about that last time with the New Jersey Comic Con a little bit. So it's always interesting to know the differences there.
Yeah, for sure. And Elijah, you were there for the entire convention. I remember talking to you a bit while you were there.
No, New York Comic Con, I was always, New York Comic Con, I was only there for 2 days, two of the 4.
Okay. So, yeah,
the Trek days.
The Trek days. Well, I guess that would be the important focus for our discussion here tonight, the Trek days. And they had a bit of Discovery stuff going on there at New York Comic Con. You guys want to give us a little bit of a glimpse into what went on from a Discovery aspect?
Ken,
sure. All right, thanks. So there was at Comic-Con itself, there was really one large Discovery event, and that took place on Saturday afternoon. And that was actually off-site from the Javits Center. It was at the Madison Square Garden Theater, which, if you're walking, it was about a 15-minute hike from the Javits Center at Madison Square Garden itself. And that was sort of your typical Comic-Con panel. The entire regular cast of the show was there. Sonequa Martin-Green, Jason Isaacs, Doug Jones, plus some of the Klingons, Mary Chieffo, the whole cast, including producers Akiva Goldsman, Alex Kurtzman, Heather Caden, Gretchen Burke, and Aaron Harberts. And it was actually hosted by Dr. Mae Jemison, who last showed up at the Trek audience in Las Vegas this year.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole crew was up on stage, and it was a good about 45 or 50-minute event with a lot of question and answer time from the audience and a lot of discussion about, at that point, only the 2-hour premiere and the first regular episode, Context is for Kings, had aired. So it was the weekend before the weekend of the Butcher's Knife episode.
Now, wait, Ken, did you mention the surprise guest that showed up?
I didn't yet, no. during our question
yes.
and answer period.
Yeah, we there was a surprise Q&A appearance by Michelle Yeoh.
Nice.
The captain of the Shenzhou. Yeah, she surprised I think everybody. I don't know that even the cast knew, or a majority of the cast at least knew that she was going to be making an appearance. And during that Q&A, she walked up to the microphone and had asked whether or not we would see Captain Georgiou once again. And it's funny because there are some images from that moment, and you see the fan behind her, jaw dropped. I mean, I wish I was that person just to feel that excitement of having Michelle Yeoh right in front of me. Yeah, that was really exciting. It was certainly one of the highlights of that panel.
Definitely, and I think she had like sunglasses and a hat on when she came up to the microphone, and she was wearing one of the now famous disco shirts.
Right, right.
One of the first times that showed up, yeah. And at the panel, they had actually showed the first opening act of what was going to be the following day's episode, the sequence where we see Burnham's uniform being replicated from the inside out. So that was sort of the sneak preview for the audience at that point.
So were the fan questions like pretty positive stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I think that honestly, the question that stands out to me was someone had asked specifically about the Klingons and how they were being represented. From what I remember, and Ken, you can correct me, was the person who asked the question came from a heritage of colonialized engagement. Like they came from someone who from a history of colonialization from an outside third party source, and so their question was very deep regarding the Klingons. Right, it was a very cultural heavy question that I believe it was Aaron Harbert addressed very diplomatically and very, very well regarding how they treated the Klingons, which is it's their dedication to the culture, their dedication to expanding the Klingons in a way that we've never seen before.
Yeah, that was definitely a big part of that conversation. I mean, I think they even used the phrase something like humanizing the Klingons in terms of making them a real culture compared to how we've seen them in the past and in the prior series. The only other question that really stands out, remembering to me, is a fan actually did get up to the microphone and ask the producers when they talk to their friends about the show and try to get their friends to join, how do they talk about the paywall? And that was the quote. They used the word paywall.
Yeah.
So there was some groans from the audience at that, but the producers, I think it was either Heather Caden or Gretchen Berg, handled it fairly diplomatically, trying to say that, yes, it's part of the service, but, we try to make the presentation and the content worth the cost that people may pay to watch it on CBS All Access. So, really making it worth that subscriber fee, that it's not just another show, a real cinematic effort, and all those other things we've now seen as the series has progressed.
Did that person seem to have their question satisfied?
That's a good question. You can always kind of tell some people have a little bit of an agenda when they try to ask questions like that. But I thought the audience responded well to how they handled that answer from the stage.
And that event looked pretty full from those photos that we saw. Was there a pretty big audience for that panel then?
There was certainly a pretty big audience. I mean, it's hard to tell because the thing about the Madison Square Garden Theater was that they were holding many big ticket events there, right? So there was a combination of flow over from previous events and people sitting in their same seats because they weren't emptying out the theater between panels. So how many people were there for Trek versus how many people were there for like the following panel is hard to tell. However, sitting there and I got there just in time. I got there just after Mae Jemison had been introduced. The theater seemed full, and not only did it seem full, but it felt electrified. Like it felt that a majority of people sitting in that theater were in fact Trekkers.
Yeah, I felt that a little bit as well. Now, I had a little bit of a different experience than your arrival. I planned out my day once I learned the panels that were surrounding Discovery at the theater. I spent my Saturday at the Madison Square Garden Theater. So the Discovery panel was somewhere around, I want to say maybe it was like 3 p.m., something like that. And right before the Discovery panel was Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with that entire cast, which that packed the house during that hour. And scheduled right after the Discovery panel was Marvel's panel for the Punisher series on Netflix, followed by the Walking Dead panel.
Wow.
So it was really sandwiched right in the middle of a lot of big ticket items for that theater. So kind of knowing what was surrounding that, I got to the Madison Square Garden around 9:30 in the morning, and just waited in line with a bunch of people to get into the theater. I camped out during a panel for a series I'd never heard of, but clearly had a very passionate younger female audience, I'd say. And then once that cleared out, there was definitely a solid packed house for the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. panel. Their whole cast was there, which I guess hadn't really happened outside of San Diego Comic-Con before. And they also showed something like 30 minutes of the upcoming season's premiere for that panel.
Wow.
And then the rest of the people who may not have been there for either that or Discovery were truly camping out all day for the Walking Dead panel. That's certainly got a passionate fan base, and there were people who were going to be there for 8-9 hours in that day in that theater.
I wonder if we picked up any fans from those other fan bases.
And certainly hope so.
So in New York Comic Con, you can actually plant yourself in a seat in the theater and just stay there until the panel you want starts up.
So New York Comic Con's run by Reed Pop, who did last year's Mission New York panel. And aside from their main stage events in the Javits Center, they don't clear the theater. So if you want a good seat and you found one, and you can sit there all day if you want in most of those other venues.
You can't hold the seat. If you want to get up and leave and come back, you can't hold it, right?
Not really. I mean, if someone's nice sitting next to you, or you have somebody you're there with to hold your seat while you go to the restroom or go to get a beverage or something, that's one thing. But leaving for more than a few minutes probably isn't a very good idea.
I find it's interesting though with a mixed convention like that. Elijah was saying he's found a lot of Trek fans there. He felt a lot of Trek fans at that panel. That's really interesting to me, because a lot of times I go to the bigger mixed cons and the Star Trek presence just isn't as strong at a lot of those. It's kind of cool that was there.
Yeah, I think the fact that it had a specific event probably draws some.
Yes, yeah. A specific event is certainly what drew the Trekkies into one location, because here's the thing about something like New York Comic Con versus something like Star Trek Las Vegas, or something like Star Trek New Jersey, or a localized Star Trek convention that's hosted by Creation, is that it's so big. Like, there's no other way to describe it, right? It's massive. And I find myself, my first New York Comic Con experience, I want to say, was in 2013 or something like that. It was a while ago. I was looking through pictures earlier today, and I can't remember what year it was, but it wasn't that long ago. 2009 maybe was actually my first New York Comic Con. and I had already been to Star Trek Las Vegas, and I remember feeling the same thing I feel at New York Comic Con, which is, man, there's not enough Trek here, man. I'm all by myself. I got nothing. I have no camaraderie. There's like, it's so packed and so dense, and there's so many. There are so many franchises involved and so much lore. That it's very easy to be overwhelmed and very easy to get lost.
That's absolutely true, and I certainly found that when I migrated to the Javits on Sunday. That was the day that I chose to go to the actual show floor. I live a couple hours away from New York, so I had to sort of pick my days and for being in town. Now, the nice thing about the Javits is, it certainly got a lot of floor space, but compared to what was there last year for Mission New York, it was like, I mean, you were shoulder to shoulder with people in a lot of those walkways. And whether you were in the vendors area or down in one of the lower levels trying to get to one of the autograph rooms, it could probably get pretty claustrophobic for some people.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to mention just the massive mix of media and artistry and different production teams. Just there's so much going on. You can just turn around the wrong direction and you never find somebody you might have visited there with again until you both leave. It's a real maelstrom of activity there for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I remember that I kind of withdrew from going to New York Comic Con was just the intense crowd sizes. So I guess that's not something that's going to change anytime soon. But did you guys happen to notice in amongst these giant crowds, was there a significant amount of Star Trek cosplay mixed in there anywhere?
I didn't.
No, only yourself.
Yeah, only and all I did was wear my jacket, my Star Trek Online jacket. It's which is a shame, right? Because this is how I felt in 2009. Is that Star Trek is terribly underserved in a convention like this.
Yeah.
There is so much Marvel, so much Star Wars,
yeah.
Disney. Yeah, right. Now all in one, right? So much of that type of presence. And yet I wish that CBS would invest more money into something like New York Comic Con, right? Into something like Reed Pop. Now they did with the Discovery panel, but there were only a handful of vendors that were dealing with New York Comic Con exclusives, right? So you had IDW that I think had a one comic, if that. I don't think that they.
Yeah, they had two things, if I remember. One, they had sort of, and this is something they had at Las Vegas as well. They had sort of a hard paperboard slick of their upcoming Discovery #1 comic cover. And on the back of that was a variant cover of the Shenzhou. But again, that was just a double-sided print, not an actual comic. But they did have John Byrne, who does the Star Trek New Visions photo novels, had a signing and a New York Comic Con exclusive cover, I believe, on the Friday of the show. But yeah, you're right. In terms of vendors, there's a big Marvel vendor. There's a big Star Wars room, a big DC movie section, all those big things you see. And when it came to Star Trek, you kind of had to seek out names of vendors that we from the fan base are aware of, like Fansets or Anovos or some of the book publishers or, Eagle Moss, which actually had a pretty nice position near the front of the vendors room for all their Star Trek and other ship models. But there really wasn't any one sort of concentrated area that was just Star Trek. Now, I will say that on the outside of the Javits Center, when you approach the building as a pedestrian getting to the entry areas, it's sort of a long walkway on a sidewalk as you traverse the length of the Javits Center, that entire walkway was covered in Star Trek Discovery character banners. So they were the same sort of character at the front of the Javits Center. So
yes, along the fence. That's yeah, right. I remember. Yes.
So these are the posters that debuted in Vegas, the close up of each character's eye, and so they were sort of in a vertical banner layout. So there was probably, with the length of the Javits, there was probably 40 of them, of those long posters, just repeated for the entire length of the building. So at least it had a visual presence in the front.
Right.
But once you were sort of inside, you kind of had to go find the Trek yourself if you knew where.
Right. The other big event, other than the Discovery panel, was the interview with the author of the Jean-Luc Picard autobiography. Like that's really the next big thing.
Yeah, David A. Goodman, is that his name? Yeah. It's sitting right on.
Oh my goodness! Okay, all right. So I'm gonna lay down some truth here. That was such a horrible interview. Oh my goodness.
Oh no.
Because it was one of those things that I was like, okay, I have to get to, I have to listen to, and see if there's anything worth reporting on. But the interviewers really had no clue what they were like interviewing for. It was just these generic Star Trek questions. It was so disappointing.
Oh, that's too bad. I didn't get a chance to see that. I think that was Saturday, right?
Yes, I believe that was Saturday.
Yeah, that's probably when I was camped down at Madison Square Garden. But I know David Mack was there signing, though. He was there signing his Desperate Hours, the Discovery
and
novel.
that was on like Sunday. That was either on Sunday or Friday. That was the day that I wasn't there, I think. But what I guess what I'm trying to say is that there were the Star Trek highlights at Reed Pop's New York Comic-Con were few and far between, because they had interviewed the author of the Picard autobiography live. Like they did it at this like separate little theater at the convention. There were chairs. It was a live stream kind of event where people could watch if they weren't at Comic-Con. And the hosts were so unprepared. I was antsy. I was sitting there antsy, like, oh my God, please, let me ask a question. Please, let me just get up there. Can I take over? Please, I can do this. Any one of us here could have done a better job at the interview.
I find it so interesting because they also do Mission New York, right? And Mission New York was great. Reed Pop, I'm talking about.
Right.
So I wonder why they didn't know to be prepared, or at least have Trek knowledgeable people doing interviews when they've done an entire Star Trek convention already.
I think that, well, interestingly enough, is that I think that particular interview was done on Twitch. It was done on twitch.tv. So it may not have been Reed Pop, but instead Amazon people. Right, because didn't Amazon recently buy out Twitch? So, it may have been a separate Reed Pop, separate from Reed Pop.
Okay. Did you guys want to talk any about? Then I assume there weren't many Star Trek vendors if there wasn't much of a Star Trek presence.
Yeah, and I kind of made a rundown of who I saw was there. I kind of planned out my venture through the chaos there on the floor. So, I mean, first, obviously Fansets, who a lot of us have dealt with for many things. I know you guys have been running the contest on the unofficial Las Vegas Facebook group for those new pins. I got a chance to talk to Lou, their sort of director there, and he said that they had Marvel pins, they do DC pins, and obviously the Star Trek pins that we've all seen here the last several months. And he told me that they were making their most sales on Star Trek pins at the event. They were selling out of all sorts of the regular character pins that they've kind of been running out. And then, of course, they also had their own Star Trek Discovery New York Comic Con exclusive pin, the Delta Shield with the Discovery ship on it. I don't know if any of you were able to get one of those.
They are
our
awesome.
our dear friend Marina Kravchuk, our convention correspondent, was nice enough to pick those up and send them to us.
Oh, nice.
So I have one in my hand, and thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Marina. Yes, I have one too. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really nice. Let's see. There were several book publishers there. Simon & Schuster there had, some of their usual Star Trek books, and David Mack was signing for Desperate Hours. Titan Books was there. They're the publisher of the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard and the new Joel Harlow Star Trek Beyond makeup effects book.
Right.
And they had another exclusive pin, which I believe is a Fansets production of the Enterprise D, sort of a top-down pin of the Enterprise D that you would get there if you bought a copy of the Picard autobiography from their booth. Let's see what else. Anovos was there, and they had their sort of prototype Discovery uniforms on display. They were not letting people get too close because they were still prototypes. I was able to talk to one of the booth representatives there, and there were still some things about what they had on display that were going to be changed, some of the materials, and it was all sort of clothespin together on the back of their mannequins, so they didn't want people getting really to look behind any of that stuff.
Don't touch our $1,000 prototype costumes.
Yeah, pretty much. But they did have the more sort of like $50 range away mission shirts. Those are sort of like the short sleeve early season 1, season 2 Next Generation uniform shirts. They just kind of have like a graphic of the Starfleet Delta on them. So I'm not sure how the quality or durability of it. I didn't get the chance to really examine it closely, but that was one of the other Star Trek items they had on display. Chronicle Books was there. They've been doing the Star Trek Cats books.
Oh, right. Jenny Park, I think, is the author.
Mm-hmm. So they had those books, and they also had the Star Trek Cats pins that they've had out for a couple of months now. And they had a show exclusive that I believe it was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Each day they were giving away patches, like sew-on or iron-on patches. One of the Kirk cat, one of the Spock cat, and one, I believe, the Scotty cat. For show attendees, I think they were like $5 a piece as an exclusive. Let's see, Hallmark was there. We saw them at Las Vegas, where they showed in Las Vegas. They showed the first of the 2018 planned Star Trek ornaments they have coming, which was the scene of Sulu with the fencing from The Naked Time in the original series. Since then, they also announced that the USS Discovery is coming. And then in New York, they showed the third 2018 planned ornament, which is an original series tricorder. And let's see, that was pretty much it. IDW, they didn't have too much aside from what we've already discussed. And then last, this is probably most notable, and I know, Elijah, you checked this out. Eagle Moss was there, and they had their USS Discovery and USS Shenzhou large-scale prototype models on display.
Yeah. IDW had their booth, and then they also had a party for their subscribers that were there. And I was humbled by the fact that I was invited to attend to their offsite party. And so they not only did they have the Discovery and the Shenzhou on display, but they had most of their iconic ships from Star Trek on display, and then they teased Battlestar Galactica.
Oh wow!
Oh my goodness gracious!
They had some of their prototype fighters there in their little glass case, I think, too.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And I mean, it was just marvelous to see that, because I'm a big Galactica fan, especially the reimagining by Ronald D. Moore, and I immediately fell in love. It's one of those things that's like, yeah, I'll pay whatever money I need to pay to get these ships because I love them. Their event also included a DeLorean from Back to the Future, which is how do I describe it? It's you subscribe and you end up getting pieces of the DeLorean over time, where you end up building a scaled model of the DeLorean piece by piece.
Yeah, it's like a model kit subscription situation. Yeah, but their Discovery and Shenzhou were really nice looking. They were not. They did not have finalized paint on them. They were very clear to stress that, and they had little signs that said, paint not final for those taking photos. But the detail on both ships was really, really fantastic, and they're definitely larger than the sort of regular size Eagle Moss ships that people might be familiar with. They're closer to 8 or 9 inches long each. So they're definitely the larger scale. I believe their plan is that because that's going to be a separate model subscription if you subscribe to the existing Eagle Moss Starships collection.
And I think you have to sign up for those now, I think, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's a separate subscription. I mean, obviously, you'll be able to buy them individually like they sell through their web store now, but they do have subscription pre-orders open now for their Discovery line. I think the Shenzhou is supposed to be their first release in January or very early February, if I remember correctly. They also had 2 of their other not yet released large scale, I guess they're calling the Jumbo or the XL Starships line. They had their USS Voyager and their NX-01 models, which are also in the 8 to 9 inch length. And those are supposed to be out, I think, towards the end of 2017.
I know they had a couple of their larger ones at STLV, too. I just can't remember which ones they were. I know one of our friends, Jim Morehouse, picked one up.
Yeah, at Vegas, they had the original Enterprise, the Enterprise D, and the Enterprise E models of the XL size. So these are the next ones down the line.
So I think it's a good time to move on to the other event after the Comic-Con. So the Paley Center event was not related to Comic-Con. It was a different event, so different ticket that you had to do that. Did you both go to that?
Yes.
Yes.
I went.
Cool. Who wants to tell us about it?
I mean, I'll start by saying that it was a much more intimate event where, I mean, it was a much smaller theater. I almost felt like I could reach out and touch them.
That's for sure. Intimate is definitely the right word. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like it's a very small, almost like a black box, small performing theater. But even the stage is not that large. I mean, there might have been maybe 15 or 20 rows of seats, maybe 20 people across. So it's definitely a very, very small venue for these interview type presentations. And at one point they sort of rearranged where people sat, and I ended up in like the third row, and I felt that I was almost like right up in someone's almost right up in their faces of the whole cast, since there was almost a dozen people squeezed onto the stage between the cast and the production team that was there accompanying them.
So did this one then have a moderator as well?
Yes, it had a moderator, an individual from who's actually
CNN, right?
Actually, I believe he's part of CBS News, their team.
CBS News, yes.
I can't remember offhand the gentleman's name, but I thought he did a fairly decent job. He seemed to know his Star Trek as much as the role required.
Yeah, there wasn't anything about the event that was headline breaking, I want to say. I mean, over the last week, for instance, we finally had a definitive answer regarding Michael Burnham, the name Michael. Like where did that stem from? And it was from the Archangel Michael. I feel that we did not get that from anything from New York, whether it was the Comic-Con event at Madison or at the Paley Center. My biggest takeaway from the Paley event was how remarkably diplomatic they all are. Like how beautifully articulate they are when addressing questions that are hot topics, whether it be about race, whether it be about gender, whether it be about sexuality and its representation in Star Trek. I think that I specifically remember Sonequa, Anthony, and why is his name escaping me? Wilson Cruz. Wilson Cruz. Yes. I those three handled some very difficult questions beautifully, and those questions regarding race, gender, sexuality, and what that means in the future, if at all, if it means anything in the future, which to them it doesn't, and that's remarkable.
Were they fan questions or were they from the moderator?
So this is a great point, and I really wanted to bring up this part about the questions because this actually harkens back to some of the conversation that many of us had at Las Vegas this year, and that you talked about on your Las Vegas wrap-up shows, the questions for the event. So unlike Las Vegas or Comic-Con proper, there wasn't a microphone line. There wasn't a spot for people to go and stand in front of the panel and give their questions. Questions were collected in writing before the panel and then provided to the moderator to ask.
Awesome.
And there were actually people in the audience while we were waiting for it to start. I actually heard them comment about, boy, I wish we could do this at Las Vegas.
Okay, so do you happen to remember like one of these questions, like how it was phrased? I'm just curious if it came from like what side of fandom they came from, basically.
Boy, I don't remember too much about the specific questions themselves at this point, unfortunately.
Okay.
But they were all they all seemed to be good conversation starters for the cast that were there. And as Elijah said, these are some smart people in this cast, and they really know how to speak very well about a lot of different topics.
Yeah.
The most of things that I remember in terms of real show-related information mostly came from some of the production team, talking about how the character of Saru was originally a much more intricate alien character with like up to 10 or 12 eyes.
Yeah.
That the tardigrade was originally going to be some sort of actual crew member on the Discovery.
Ephraim.
That's right.
Ephraim.
And one tidbit that came out is that Saru's his snacking on blueberries wandering the halls of the Discovery actually came from a habit that Brian Fuller had when he was in the writer's room.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are some nice moments there. But when the when the whole thing concluded, I'm sorry, Heather, you go ahead.
Oh no, finish, please.
What I was going to say was when the whole thing concluded, what was really nice is that, like a lot of maybe, Broadway or other performing shows, there was sort of a stage door area where the cast came out afterwards and spoke to and took photos and autographs with a lot of the fans who were there to see them afterwards. I think, Marina shared a number of her photos in the unofficial Facebook.
Yeah.
Yep. Elijah, I think you had one with somebody.
Oh, Anthony Rapp. Yeah, but it was like, excuse me, Mr. Rapp, can I take a picture with you, please? And he was like, give me fine, I'll give it. Yeah, it was definitely not a picture that I was willing to share on like the priority one aspect of it, because it was me fanning out. I was like, please, sure. Mr. Rapp, you're in Rent and I do a lot of music theater. Please, can I just do one picture? And yeah. It was blurry and horrible, and I just didn't care. I have it. That's all I care about.
Oh, it's very special to have. So yeah, I really hope that we get to see something like this at STLV, just because I think that events like that, where you get to listen to the actors that are so well spoken, I just feel like that's something that a lot of fans that aren't connecting with Discovery aren't getting. And I would hope that maybe seeing, and some fans out there just don't care because they're the ones that hate diversity apparently and hate having gay people in Star Trek and everything else. And so you can never placate those people. But maybe for some people that are on the fence about it, getting to listen to the actors talk about Discovery, you can tell that they are passionate about this. Like, at least people like Sonequa and Anthony, people that are there for the long run. I don't know so much about some of the one-off characters that were there for an episode or two, but like you can tell that they get Star Trek. They understand why it is so loved, and they want to honor Star Trek. And I feel like maybe if they're there sitting in front of us, like maybe that will get through to some of the people that just aren't connecting with Discovery.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think, the more that we see of, the actors off camera and in person, the more of a connection I think that people definitely will find with them. And even just the limited interaction that folks had with the representation at Vegas this year was a good start. And I certainly hope to expand that next year as well, for sure.
Right. Look at how Sonequa Martin Green handled Pierce Morgan on British Today. This is a video that was traveling around the interwebs this last week. I think that it I get it that CBS is almost thinking like we have the Trek fans in the bag, but it's really us, right? Yeah. It's all of us that are going to push for the second season that has been confirmed, and the third and the fourth, and hopefully moving forward, right? I mean,
yeah, and I don't think it's in the bag. I really, even though we've been renewed for a second season, there's still, I feel like, and maybe it's just because there's such a dichotomy in the world today, and it's beyond Star Trek fandom, but I feel like at least half of Star Trek fans are still not watching it, or hate watching it, or just not liking it, not connecting it. I've seen people who are watching it and are still just like, I don't like it. This is the worst Star Trek, etc. I'm really curious to see what will happen, once this full season ends. I know that CBS All Access they've just announced like they're rebooting Twilight Zone, and I'm hoping that rumor about Nicholas Meyer maybe working on some other Star Trek show. I mean, we haven't heard anything about that since it was a rumor, but I feel like they're going to need something else to keep the momentum going. But I feel like it's those of us here who love Star Trek, but are also really enjoying the show, that are, we're the ones being positive about it, and we're ranting and raving, and and supporting it, but there's still a large part of the fandom that's not supporting it. So I think there's caution there.
Yeah, and what are the ripple effects of both halves of the Star Trek fandom on people who are not necessarily Star Trek fans who would be subscribing to watch Discovery? You know, people are looking on social media and comment threads on articles about Discovery and seeing, you know, positive and negative stuff, and wonder what the impact on, new Star Trek fans would be, seeing that kind of, toxicity of some of the folks out there having some of the nasty things that they've been saying about the show and the diversity. And I don't know, I like to think the positive voices can outweigh them and help sway some of the newer fans to come on board. But the negative stuff definitely doesn't help.
I think that if Twilight Zone and this new buddy cop comedy that they're doing,
right.
I think that if these two things kick off, what we may see is a the word is escaping me, a retroactive commitment to Star Trek. Mm-hmm. Right, because I think that Twilight Zone is going to reach an audience that is both Star Trek and beyond. The buddy comedy that includes Will Ferrell and Tim Meadows from an SNL that I miss. Oh, right, yes. That's like the last SNL that I ever watched. Yeah. Was with Tim Meadows. And Tim Meadows was there for a long while, like even after Ferrell. I think early Tim Meadows. I may have been the kind of person that says, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to subscribe to this," and then, "Oh, look, I'm discovering Discovery," kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's people who are resisting the whole subscription notion. Getting past that. I'm not paying for just one show mindset is the hurdle that still needs to be cleared for, I think, for a lot of people.
And it's also the quality as well, which like right now, you can go watch the older series on CBS All Access, but they're not comparable to the quality of Netflix.
Why is that?
I don't get it.
Warmaganders.
Yeah.
Why is it that CBS does not have the HD versions of TNG or TOS?
There's no HD versions, and then CBS All Access has no fast forward or 15-second fast, that type of thing. And then in addition, now I have not had major problems with the service. I thankfully was able to avoid that terrible weekend where, most people couldn't watch it, or whatever they said it was, 15%. Mm-hmm. I think it was much higher than that. But I do have intermittent skipping or buffering or whatnot. It's gotten better, but I do still see reports of other people that are having issues to the point of canceling. And that's really frustrating, because I feel like at this point, and I understand there are third-party services at play, but I feel like at this point, like they've got the audiences watching. We're almost to the 9th episode. Like you should have it figured out by now. People should not be experiencing those problems at the level that I'm seeing it.
I agree. I only had that one problem with that one episode that you were mentioning, but other than that, I've had a pretty smooth ride watching Discovery.
But you're not watching it when it's aired, like when it's...
Yeah, I am. A lot of times I am, yeah. There's only a couple that I actually missed and had to watch later, but most of them I've watched at 8:30 when they've gone live. But the only issue that I really have watching them when they're live, for some reason, the Apple TV app never puts the newest episode at the front of the list. I always have to scroll around and try to find where it is in the list, and it's usually near the end. Like, oh, there it is.
So, yeah, the Roku app. That's what I watch on. Does the same thing. It puts it to the end of the list, not the most prominent new listing.
Yeah, it does it on the CBS website too. That way. But
everywhere.
After Trek is in newest order, like most recent date. Like what?
Yeah,
it's funny. I just got an email today from somebody who shared their exchange with the CBS Interactive support team, and it was less than stellar.
Ooh.
Yeah.
For the Apple TV. These and it had to do with the fact with that very thing that you mentioned about the 15% that had the problem over the weekend on Apple TV, blah blah blah. But it took like a week and a half for him to get a reply, and it was it just. But anywho,
Yeah. Well, let's move back to kitchen stuff.
Sidebar.
Okay, so anything else notable about the Paley event? I think we've probably covered it at this point. Sounds like they were there for some photos at the end, and then that was kind of it, right?
I wasn't there for the photos.
Yeah, I mean, there was another sort of sneak preview shown at the time. At the time, they showed the first interaction with Lorca and Ash Tyler and Harry Mudd, and that was a week ahead of that episode's airing. So that was a different preview from what was shown at the Comic-Con event. But but past that, at this point, there's nothing really further, I think, that we haven't already talked about it that stood out.
Okay, so let's move on to an experience that you had, Ken.
Yeah.
So you were able to get one of these super secret special invites to After Trek.
Nice.
How many people here watch After Trek besides me? Jeff, I don't think you watch it, right?
No,
I watch it. I do.
Okay.
I try to get some snippets of information, additional info.
Yeah, and that's why I watch it. There's the good little tidbits there and whatnot. But Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, Heather, After Trek invites, at least to my knowledge, are invite only, and I can't really say how I got mine, but I was able to get one for the weekend of Comic-Con, since I was already in New York City. That worked out well for me. So that was the third week the show was airing. So that was the night of The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry. After Trek is actually filmed in New York. It's not filmed in LA or one of the other, entertainment cities you might think a lot of these live shows are filmed at. I know the Walking Dead after show, which is also produced by Embassy Row, the company that produces After Trek, that is filmed in Los Angeles, as far as I know. But After Trek is actually filmed in a building in Tribeca, in New York City, which is, for those not familiar with New York, it's kind of close to where the World Trade Center area of the city is. From the outside, you really would have no idea. There's no signs that say Embassy Row or really the production company. So you're just going to have to know which building to go to. And you actually have to be 21 to attend taping of After Trek, because once you get up to where the studio is, you enter the Starfleet Lounge, which does serve alcohol to its adult guests. So when you get inside, it's like on the 6th or 7th floor of this building. There's a little bit of a lounge area where there's some couches and chairs, and it's all kind of space themed. There's a nice big TV on the wall, and that's where the audience members get to actually watch the episode that night After Trek will be about. So they had, the night that I was there, I guess it wasn't a streaming copy of the episode. It was, just a digital version that they were playing directly there for the audience from CBS, so that could be completed before the live show prep could begin. So there was the audience is not very large for these shows. I would say when I was there might have been a total of maybe 14 audience members, including myself.
Yeah.
So, we got to hang out, watch the episode for a bit. The lounge menu, there were three choices. for alcohol. One was a Romulan ale, which is blue Gatorade and vodka. This is the menu they had out for everyone. One was a Sumerian Sunset, which is, I guess, tequila and orange juice, according to their recipe. And the last is called Beam Me Up, with beam in quotation marks, and that's whiskey and Coke as their choices. So, we all got to sit in the lounge and watch the episode. And for this taping, this is where Jason Isaacs and Doug Jones were the guests, along with the showrunners Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg. And about 5 minutes into the episode, Doug Jones and Jason Isaacs came out and hung out with us to watch the episode on the couches with the rest of us.
Pretty awesome.
Which was really neat. And this was the first episode where we saw how the spore drive worked and all that. So it was kind of a interesting event to watch with a group like that. And they certainly seemed very into the episode when they were watching it, because I don't think, at least from what some of the cast members have said in interviews, they don't really get to see any of the episodes ahead of time either. So this, I think, was their first experience seeing the episode.
Yeah. That's really neat. So do you watch the episode first and then they film After Trek?
Yeah, I mean, After Trek is filmed and streamed to All Access Live on Sunday evenings. So the episode, we did get to see it. I think we might have gotten to see it maybe 10 minutes before it released onto CBS All Access. It wasn't like a very early screening like that. But once it was completed, we all were shepherded through the offices of this. The production area onto the stage of After Trek, which, with that big wooden table shaped like the Starfleet Delta, it looks pretty large there on TV. It is not a large room. I would say the stage is maybe the size of, maybe a little bit larger than a regular sized hotel room. Basically, the width of that table, with maybe 3 feet on each side, is really the size, how big that is. And with some of the episodes of After Trek that have had maybe 4 guests on them, you can kind of tell everyone's shoulder to shoulder at that table.
Yeah, so that's a good reason why they have Skype people too, aside from the actors' inability to get there, but it's also convenient for not squeezing in more people.
That too. So the dozen or so of us that were there as audience members kind of squeeze into 2 corners of the stage behind. I think there was 4 cameras, and then there's a little bit of a control booth as well. And then once the episode is airing, there's a production team member to sort of coach a little bit on when to clap, when to cheer. When the episodes are starting, when it goes to commercial break, and so forth. But definitely everyone involved seems like they're really, really interested in the subject matter and interested in Star Trek. Matt Myra, who's the host, he actually flies in from California every week to film the show.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And
Whoa, that's insanity. I had not heard that. Holy crap.
He's based in LA, and he writes for a TV show out there, and he does other shows in Los Angeles area. So he flies into New York on either early Sundays or late Saturday, does After Trek, and then catches an early flight back to the West Coast. So he's been doing that every week for the last, I guess, almost 2.5 months now.
My sinuses would be so messed up.
Right?
There's no way that I'd be able to do a 5.5-hour flight. But oh man, there's just no way. All the Afrin, all the Nasonex, you name it. It's just I'd have to take that.
Well, maybe that will give people a little bit more appreciation for him, since he's getting a little pushback.
Well, I'll tell you, he definitely is somebody who knows his Star Trek. He has his own Star Trek: The Next Generation podcast about the show, and he definitely is a wealth of knowledge on the series. I mean, a lot of the references he'll make during taping, I can probably tell you we're not in the or not on the teleprompter.
Yeah.
So he knows his deep cut. And there's a lot of nice Discovery-related props that are there on the stage. You can see when it's on television. A lot of it are some of the things that we saw on display in Las Vegas or at San Diego Comic-Con, like the Discovery phaser and tricorder and communicator and all those various props. They also have one of the prototypes of Eagle Moss's USS Discovery starship model there on the stage. And a number of Star Trek and science-related books that have come out over the last several years. And what started out as just one or two tribbles on the shelf each week is growing into a large expanding pile of tribbles with each new week. So that's a fun little gag they're doing as well.
Shazad Latif will have to be very careful when he goes on the show.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So one last question and then we'll move on, but were they pretty good with I know that Doug Jones and Jason Isaacs were there watching with you, but were they pretty cool with letting you talk to them or take a picture, or was it a hands-off situation?
It seemed like it was relatively casual. There was obviously a representative or two from CBS who was there in terms of, covering the actors and that kind of thing. But, it wasn't really, it definitely wasn't, like you think of, don't speak to the talent, that kind of
right.
thing.
Yeah.
They basically said, hey, make room on me, make room for me on the couch. I'm coming to watch.
Yeah.
People squeezed over and let them in. And, but once the taping was over, there wasn't really a lot of time to really speak to the actors because most of they were trying to just sort of clear everyone out to wrap the production for the evening.
Yeah.
But a few of us asked, and we were able to go take some photos of the set and the backing and the props they had on display, just as a sort of a memento of the visit. That was since that was Doug Jones' first appearance on the show, he had brought his his Saru hoof boots
right.
as well. So I was able to get some good photos of those up close. But past that, it was really kind of, the actors kind of had to get on their way to wherever their next location was going to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you got to go. I think everyone here is envious. We all want the secret invitation. So if you're listening out there, I'll come from Denver. All right. So let's move on to the last subject we're going to talk about, which is the Star Trek Starfleet Academy experience, which was in New York last year and has returned for, I think, another 5-month period. In New York, they had the Live Long and Trek On Star Trek celebration early this month. Elijah, you were there for that. And then Ken, you attended the Academy last year. So Elijah, do you want to tell us a little bit about the event on November 3rd?
It was the exact same thing as it was last year. I was there. Yeah, no, because I was there at the Intrepid when it debuted. The experience is, in fact, the exact same interactive experience that you would have experienced at the Intrepid this time last year. The only difference is that the Liberty Science Center is certainly much more interactive than the Intrepid, right? The Intrepid the Intrepid had a hangar essentially built for the experience, and then you could also tour the Intrepid separately. Whereas at the Liberty Science Center, it's in-house, so you buy the ticket and you can experience the Liberty Science Center exhibits and the Star Trek experience. It really is the exact same thing. It has suffered some travel problems and what I mean by that is that some things work and some things don't. since it's been at the Intrepid, but that doesn't take away from the experience. Now, nothing from Discovery is at the Liberty Science Center. It's all TOS, TNG, Voyager, DS9.
So for someone like me who's never been, then is it props? Is it like sets, like a TOS bridge type thing? What exactly is it?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, it's first of all, just to clarify on the travel issues that Elijah mentioned, it is a touring exhibit. So it started out at the Intrepid in New York City last year, and then it moved to actually, I believe it started in Canada last year and then came to the Intrepid or something like that. And then it's after it left the Intrepid in late 2016 or early 2017, it went back to another location in Canada and now is back in the New York area again. So what they have there, it's a combination of true screen-used props and costumes from the, I'll say the Paramount era of Star Trek television. Along with a few of the original series films, and I think they have a couple of Kelvin timeline props there, just maybe a handful like a tricorder or a phaser, that kind of thing.
I didn't even see. I did not see that. I certainly didn't see that.
Yeah, at least that was there when it was at the Intrepid last year. Some of those props may have changed. I'm not sure how that's managed. But in addition to those, which are really just kind of in display cases throughout the exhibit, you go as the guise of a Starfleet Academy attendee. So there's a lot of interactive stations with touch screens and activities of trivia and I think there's like a medical section where you sort of have a pretend sick bay where you're using a tricorder to scan a mannequin of a downed officer.
Klingon, they're Klingons.
Oh, excuse me, a downed Klingon. Excuse me. There's I think there's some like navigation things, and I think there's did they have the transporter that they had there last year?
Yeah, they had everything that was at the Intrepid was there. So the navigational experience where you had to choose what planet you had to go to, tactical, they had the Wii remote that was not calibrated since 1999.
That's the phaser, the phaser training.
Yes, the phaser training.
Yes, but to cap it all off, it does end in a big recreation of the Enterprise D bridge,
and that in and of itself is so worth it.
Yeah,
in and of itself is so worth it. I mean, you get to sit in Picard's chair, albeit maybe 2 or 3 times its size. Like it's like I sat in it and my legs were like dangling off the edge. But still though, I mean, this is a recreation that you're not going to get to experience normally in any other, even at Vegas. You're not gonna see that kind of TNG replicated experience of the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, unless you were able to visit the original Star Trek experience, that had the Enterprise D recreation, this is probably the second best at this point of what's out there. And I think they're on the bridge. They have like 7 or 8 different stations of like a
Kobayashi Maru.
Kobayashi Maru, that's right. We can try to see how many crew to save and this and that. But
how many did you save?
I can't remember the exact number, but I think I got a passing grade, or at least I came close. You kind of get like a little certificate at the end. You survived the Academy training experience.
Right. That's the thing about the experience, is that it is in fact interactive. So, for instance, you are given a wristband at the start of the exhibit that interacts with each section. So for instance, you are given questions, and it's not a right or wrong type of question. It's more of a stylistic type of question. So I guess an example would be like, you are about to engage a potentially hostile force. How would you engage? Would you open hailing frequencies? Would you raise shields, or would you fire phasers?
Yeah, it's really a scenario-based situation.
Yeah, it's scenario and almost personality-based, right? So at the end of it, you aren't graded by whether or not your answers were correct, but how you answered.
Right. And then at the end, it kind of based on, at least in the Kobayashi Maru section, and then all the different.
I said like 30 people.
Yeah, that one's pretty tough. But of the other 7 or 8 different sort of stations that are throughout the exhibit, at the end, it grades your proficiency in each topic. There's like communications and medical science, engineering. And then at the end, it sort of says, okay, you're invited to join the academy in this field. So whatever you most excelled in, whether it be command or communications, or, I think there was 6 or 7 different topics that would be your study track at the academy.
So how long does it take you then to go through the whole experience?
Boy, I think if you do everything, and depending on the crowd size, I think probably you can get through the whole thing in an hour or less.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're taking your time and really going to each station,
it works.
And it works. That's right. I remember when I went in the Intrepid, there's a section where you sort of like go to Klingon 101 language school, and you have to repeat some Klingon phrases back to a computer into a microphone. I remember having to yell pretty loudly into that microphone to get it to register, and I think I looked pretty ridiculous trying to.
We actually have on when it was on the Intrepid, I had a press pass for it, and I was able to live stream during the press pass. And I think I live streamed during that exact Klingon experience, and I was trying my darndest. But you, that's on the internet somewhere. Takovma,
That's pretty good, actually.
So the party that they had, I mean, that sounds like it was a one-time kind of a grand opening for the year event. And were there any celebrities at that? I feel like someone was there, maybe.
Yeah, Jordan Hoffman was at the event. So Jordan Hoffman is the host of Engage, the official Star Trek podcast, and he was there for most of the night doing trivia. He hosted a best con impression event that I participated in. Yeah, that was fun, and but beyond that, nobody else was there other than Jordan Hoffman.
Okay,
guys, I won Risk.
Yeah,
nice.
You know why? Because I sung it. Because I sung con and opera, but I'm giving that away to our listeners. Totally giving it away. I felt really bad. All right, I'm going to tell a story. This could be on air or off air. It doesn't matter. I go up there and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. But because we host a podcast, right? I'm like, I really shouldn't be considered for something like this. And I go up there and I sing con and I get back up and they call me back up. And I was like, no, don't do it. Please, God, no, it was a joke. So I win Risk for Star Trek Risk, and we will be giving it away for Prior to One podcast. I'm definitely giving it away. I don't feel like I deserved it, so I'm giving it away.
Aww.
And that's the Star Trek version of Risk, the board game.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I will eventually. I'm not opening it. It's yes.
All right. Well, is there anything else going on in New York, guys?
Well, you have the Statue of Liberty, and you have the Freedom Tower, and you have the Empire State Building.
Yeah,
No,
that's not Star Trek.
No, I think for now, I think the East Coast is pretty. I mean, you have the exhibit going on in Liberty Science Center until May.
Yeah.
So if you are on the East Coast, you have plenty of time to visit, and if you do, please reach out. Jeff and I are right there. We are right here. It's only an hour's drive to Jersey City Liberty State Park, and we'd be happy to. Well, I'm speaking on behalf of Jeff, but Jeff, I think it's true, right? We'd be happy to meet our listeners there for some type of event.
For sure.
So
Definitely.
yeah. So reach out to us.
Sorry, I know that you guys also do the away mission, the New York away mission stuff with Michael Wynn from time to time.
Yeah.
I think they meet maybe monthly or so, or bi-monthly, but I think there's a group on Facebook for that.
Yeah, Michael Wynn certainly deserves a shout out because he was there taking pictures and trying to arrange for groups to go. There was I think it was one of the tri-state area news providers was doing a cover of it, and he was trying to get people there at Liberty State Park at Liberty Science Center to show up in costume, and he was trying to arrange that. He was the middleman, and so a big shout out to Michael Gwynn for that and for trying to arrange that. He's definitely one of the East Coast New York tri-state area contacts that you want to be friends with.
Yeah. Okay. So you can go to New York City and you can do non-Star Trek things, which is fun.
That's true. Yeah.
Or you can go to this experience. You can hang out with Jeff and Elijah, and then you can go to Ticonderoga, which is 4 hours away,
About
and
that.
do the Star Trek tour there.
If you do 60 miles an hour.
That's still a bit of a drive. Yeah, I was up there this summer as well. It's really a neat experience. If anyone ever gets up to upstate New York, it's worth it.
Yeah, we talked about that 3 episodes ago, I think.
Yeah,
Jeff, I think three ago now.
Yeah, Buddy Ryan and I went up together for the convention. Yeah.
Jeff, Jace, our literary reviewer, lives in Vermont, and we've been talking about making spring plans to go to Ticonderoga. So you are obviously going to be my travel partner for that, sir.
All right,
take my car, and we're gonna obviously drive through Rhode Island, pick up Jake, and we're gonna go to Ticonderoga.
Okay, I'm game. Let's do it.
Right, sounds good. Good.
Then you can tell us all about it.
And then we're gonna swing by Colorado to pick up take a quick side trip. Long side trip. Just a quick one. You're right. It's just
go by like nothing. Go by like nothing.
Quick detour.
Big deal.
I just have to recommend, if anyone else driving around the East Coast, if you want to go a little bit south from New York, to make sure to check out the restored and preserved Enterprise filming model from the original series down there at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum.
Oh,
If you haven't seen it since they've completed their work, it is really something to see.
Excellent.
Jeff, we should do that, man. We should plan a trip to DC. It's definitely closer than Ticonderoga.
Yeah, we could even train it. We could even train it if you wanted to, sure.
Yeah, man. It's interesting that you mentioned that, Ken, because Thomas Maroney, who's not only a ship artist but a UI artist for Star Trek Online, was just there, and he was showing pictures of the Enterprise and in its glass case and its new home. It's not in the gift shop anymore. Oh, I was so jealous. I would love to visit the Smithsonian and see that. So
it's really impressive. For people who were following the renovation when it was occurring, we were lucky enough to at TrekCore to get a lot of inside visits to the museum when they were doing those renovations. And we were down there for the unveiling. I guess it was last July in 2016 already. And boy, when that thing lights up, it is something to see. It's so impressive.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, we should swing down there, man.
Look, man, you just after White Christmas, I'm good.
Okay.
Good. pick a weekend and we'll go down.
Sounds good. We'll plan it. Okay. So I guess that wraps up the 36th episode of Shore Leave. And before we take off for the evening, as we can go around the table and let everybody know where they can find us online if they want to talk Trek or conventions. So, Ken, where can people find you?
Well, people can find me and the rest of our team at TrekCore at our various social media outlets. We're on Twitter and Facebook at TrekCore, and of course at TrekCore.com.
Excellent. Elijah, how about you?
Well, you can interact with us on social media at Twitter at Priority One Pod, on Facebook at Priority One Podcast, and of course, you can also access us right on the web at PriorityOnePodcast.com.
Excellent. Heather Barker?
I'm at heatherbarker.com. No, just kidding. You guys can find me on Twitter, LLA Posper, and then the show itself is at Shore Leave.
She
Yes.
posts the cutest little dog pictures.
Oh, yes, she
always.
does.
That one little dog with the tongue that always sticks out is like the best.
Blizzy.
That's Blizzy. Yes.
Blizzy. Oh, okay.
Yes, lots of cute puppy pictures and Star Trek, and I try not to talk about politics. But yes, Blizzy's worth every time I may mention politics, he's worth it just to see his pictures. He's a puppy mill survivor, so he lived almost 6 years of his life in a box making babies, and he is quite spoiled now despite having only one tooth.
All right, and I am Warp Factor Jeff on Twitter. You can find the show at shoreleavepodcast.com, as Heather said, at shoreleave on Twitter. We're also facebook.com/the Tricorder Transmission. So, and I guess, did we mention the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook?
We did not, but that's where you can come and party.
Yes, you can find us there as well, along with our other administrator, Jessia Kendo. And I guess that wraps up the episode. So thanks to you guys for being here, Elijah and Ken. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Always a pleasure being on the show. Thank you guys for inviting me. And it's always lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate the invite and had a great time.
All right, and we'll see you guys next time on Shore Leave.